Joe was not the strongest hunter. He wasn't the fastest runner. In fact, Joe was a bit of a daydreamer. While the rest of the tribe was out in the mud, desperately digging for grubs, Joe stayed in the back of the cave. He found a branch of oak, hard, heavy, and stubborn. For 3 days, Joe did something insane. He didn't go out to find food. He sat by the fire, his stomach cramping with hunger, his eyes sunken and tired. The tribe walked past him and spat. "Look at Joe," they grunted. "He is lazy. He is a burden. When the winter comes, he will be the first to meet the Great Spirit." But Joe was doing something the tribe didn't understand. He was practicing delayed gratification. He was suffering today so that he could dominate tomorrow. He used a sharp flintstone to shave that oak branch. He scraped and polished until the tip was as sharp as a wolf's tooth. This, my children, is the birth of capital. Capital isn't a pile of gold or a fancy cave. Capital is simply a tool that makes your work more powerful. Joe's spear was stored labor. All the hours he spent starving were now trapped inside that sharp piece of wood. He had gambled his life on an idea. If the spear didn't work, Joe would die. If it did work, the world would never be the same. On the 4th day, Joe walked to the river. The hunters were trying to catch fish with their hands, splashing around like wet toddlers. Joe stood on a rock, balanced his weight, and whack! A fat silver fish was pinned to the riverbed, then another and another. In 1 hour, Joe had more fish than the entire tribe could catch in a day. The gamble had paid off. Joe was no longer a slave to the daily zero. He had created abundance. Now the tribe had a choice. They could hate Joe and steal his spear, but Joe was smart. He slept with it under his head. Or they could learn from Joe. Enter Lazy Larry. Larry was tired of being wet and hungry. He looked at Joe's mountain of fish and his mouth watered. Larry said, "Joe, give me the spear. I want to catch fish too." Joe looked at Larry and saw an opportunity. "Larry," Joe said through his grunts, "I spent 3 days starving to make this. It is mine, but I will let you use it. However, for every 4 fish you catch, you must give me 2. You keep 2 for yourself." Larry did some caveman math. With his bare hands, he caught 0 or maybe 1 fish a day. With Joe's spear, he could catch 10. If he gave Joe 5, Larry still had 5 fish left. 5 is bigger than 1. Larry realized that even though Joe was taking his fish, Larry was still better off than he was before. This is the great secret of the trade. Both men win. Joe gets fish without getting his feet wet. This is profit. Larry gets more fish than he ever could alone. This is a wage. Some people in the cave started shouting, "Joe is exploiting Larry. He's a parasite." But without Joe's capital, the spear, Larry would still be splashing in the mud with an empty stomach. The spear changed Larry's life as much as it changed Joe's. Success breeds expansion. Joe realized he couldn't just have 1 spear. He needed a fleet. He went to Sharpstone Steve, the best flint napper in the tribe. He said, "Steve, don't hunt. Just make spear tips all day. I will pay you 3 fat fish every sunset." Then he went to Straight Stick Stan and said, "Stan, just find the best wood. I will pay you in fish." Suddenly, Joe wasn't just a hunter. He was an entrepreneur. He had created a supply chain. Because Steve only focused on stones, he became a master at stone. Because Stan only focused on wood, he found the best wood. The spears became better, faster, and cheaper to make. This is specialization. When we stop trying to do everything ourselves and focus on what we are best at, the whole tribe gets richer. Soon the cave was overflowing with spears. There was so much meat and fish that for the first time in history, the children grew tall and the elders didn't die of hunger in the winter. This is the rising tide of capitalism. When Joe gets rich, he builds a system that feeds people he doesn't even know. But wherever there is a mountain of meat, there is a fat chief. The chief of our tribe saw Joe's success. He didn't like it. He didn't make spears. He didn't hunt. But he had a very big club and 10 strong guards. The chief walked into Joe's spear shed. "Joe," the chief grunted, "these spears are dangerous. What if a hunter uses one to poke me? And besides, some people in the other cave are jealous. It's not fair that you have so many fish." The chief demanded a cave tax. He took 30% of Joe's fish. He said it was for social harmony. He used some fish to feed the widows, which was good, but he used the rest to pay his guards to make sure no one else could start a spear factory without his permission. This is the regulation. When the chief gets too involved, Joe stops wanting to innovate. Joe thinks, why should I starve to make a better spear if the chief is just going to eat all the extra fish? The fire of progress begins to flicker. If the chief eats too much, the spear makers go back to digging for grubs, and the tribe goes back to the daily zero. As the tribe got even richer, Joe got creative. A young hunter named Fast Pete wanted a spear, but Pete had no fish to pay for it. Joe said, "Take the spear now. Hey, but you owe me 20 fish by the time the moon is full." To remember the deal, Joe took a flat river stone and scratched a picture of a spear and 20 fish on it. This was a debt note. Soon Joe had a whole pile of these rocks. He started trading the rocks. He gave Steve a 10-fish rock in exchange for a new flint knife. Steve accepted it because he knew Pete was a good hunter and would eventually catch the fish. But then things got weird. People started making fake rocks, or they promised fish from a river that was already fished out. People started feeling rich because they had piles of rocks, even though there weren't enough actual fish in the water to match the scratches on the stones. One day, someone asked, "Wait, can I actually eat this rock?" They went to Pete to collect their fish. But Pete had spent all month napping instead of hunting. He had no fish. The rock was just a rock. Panic hit the cave. Everyone tried to trade their rocks for fish at the same time, but the fish weren't there. This is the market crash. The tribe realized that wealth isn't the rock. Wealth is the spear and the hunter. The great spear trade, this capitalism, is the most powerful magic we have. It is the only thing that dragged us out of the mud and away from the daily zero. It gave us the time to sit by this fire and tell stories instead of hunting for lizards in the dark. It is fueled by the hunter's greed, but it results in the tribe's feast. It rewards the man who dreams of a better stick. But beware, do not let the promise rocks replace the actual spears. Do not let the fat chief choke the spear makers until they quit. And never forget, a spear is a tool for the hand, but it cannot replace the heart. Use the fire to stay warm, but if you let it run wild, it will burn your cave to ash. Now go. The sun is rising. Will you dig for grubs with your fingernails, or will you sharpen a stick and change the world?